if I can type. Metal shading tutorial. Oh my god, this guy's metal is so good. How to paint metal. Okay. Photoshop. Well, I don't have Photoshop, but... Okay, this is an hour long. We'll watch this. How can I show it? Hold on, Gamma Trap. From 6 years ago. I need to have... one, and then... there's... window capture. How to paint metal. And then... transform. Hit the screen. Make him small.
Trap. Hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to be looking at how to paint metal.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple different ways to do it. And there's the stylized way, and then there's the more realistic way. Both are awesome.
I'm going to be eating while we watch this.
However, the piece we're going to be working on right now is more of the stylized kind of way. And it mostly has to do with how to render the lighting and the color and make it look like a real metal texture. Now, metal is very reflective, so it depends completely around the environment of where the metal is, but we'll get into that in a bit. Here's pretty much what it's going to look like and what I'm going to walk you through. You can see here that the metal is reflecting the color of the surroundings and the various types of surroundings it's got, and there's this really interesting sheen that I really like to do in regards to how it reflects the light. So we're going to go over the best ways to do it, but here's the starting piece. This is essentially what it looks like right now, and that's what we're going to work on. So if we're going to take a look at a couple of examples, we've got this piece. It's one of my other pieces, Fury of the Mountain. Now this piece, the metal in it, it's not very detailed.
Oh my god.
I mean, it's
But
detailed.
they're detailed. This guy.
You can see that it's detailed. I've got some engravings and some markings.
I'm going to make him bigger because that's awesome.
It's almost bland in some way, but the rest of the piece kind of makes up for it because I've got all this stuff going on. But next piece I've got is a different, sort of almost different type of rendering of the metal, and this is just like armor of a dude. One of my favorite things to do with stylized metal is to handle the reflection in an interesting way. Like normally, if you have a cylinder made of metal like a Coke can, it's going to have a reflective line, just a line, boring, plain, ordinary line of light wherever the light source is in every direction, and we'll discuss that in a second. But if we look, instead of doing the typical line, I like to do this kind of like wavy, kind of interesting shapes, and like whipping and sound effects. By the way, I think, in my opinion, are perfectly reasonable and maybe even should be expected. But let's get back into this. Now, this is just a random shape. Kind of, it could be a piece of armor from like a shoulder or an elbow or even a knee. It's just boring at the moment. I just wanted to put the shape in there and some basic detail. And when I say detail, I mean like, it's got that curve and, it's got some attachments, maybe leather, maybe different type of, painted metal. So let's get into doing this big actual piece of metal now that the intro is out of the way. Now the way metal works, the first thing you got to think about is, say for example, we've got a Coke can, right? It's a cylinder, so if you flip it over on its side, it's going to look like this. It goes around, and if you stand it up, it's going to be like this. The way light is going to react to it is it's going to have shadowy parts and lighter parts. So one of the easiest things to do to make metal, and if you want to just skip this entire video, be my guest right after this point, okay? Feel free to experiment on your own. I don't want to try and sway someone's style one way or the other. if you'd like to try and just explore on your own, just get the basics and then go. Perfectly fine with that. But here's one of the biggest things I could add to this tutorial that might increase the value a little bit of your metal. Right here. Now, the main point of light reflecting off metal, if you look back at the Coke can, is light follows the direction of the metal. Now, that can be a little confusing, and if you look at the Coke can, you'll think, yeah, but the metal's going this way. And you'd be right, all right? But the direction of the metal is like this. It's vertical. So this isn't necessarily the direction of the metal. That's just how it's bent. That's just how it's curved. And this is going to be one of the most confusing parts, especially when a complex piece like this. But let's look at this real quick. The metal comes down like this, comes out like that, comes out like this, comes out like that, comes down like that. Kind of see what I'm saying? The light is coming from, say, up here. So we are going to just assume that the light's going to come down and hit one good, huge chunk of the metal. And it can't follow the metal around like this, right? If the light's coming from one point, it's going to hit one spot in the metal, because light radiates from a source. And it's going to hit all of the metal, but it's going to be reflected back from, if it's curved, one side, one section. So we've got the curve, we've got the light coming down, and it's going to hit right there. It's not going to come all the way around. It's going to go bing. Now, depending on where your eyes are, it's going to go like straight to you. Now, the good news is it also hits other things, same thing like sonar. So if it comes over here, hits this, it'll bounce down, and it'll have another smaller reflection, and that's the bounce light, and we'll get more into that in a second. So I know this is super confusing. It's a lot to think about, but the more you practice, the easier it's going to be. Just start with the main piece. All right, let's go with just the main piece of metal. So let's clean this up a bit so we have a little more room to work. If we need, I'll do some more illustrations, which I probably will. So let's assume, judging from the environment that we've made, and we could not having to use this environment at all, but we're probably going to use both this gray and the colored version to show different how metal reacts to its environment. Because aside from water and mirrors, metal is almost the most reflective thing out there. So it's going to react and almost act as a mirror to a certain extent. It's going to have a lot of reflections. Take, for example, this guy's legs are both covered in these metal platings. But here's one leg, and here's another. And if you look right here, there's a reflection of this leg on that leg. Because metal is very reflective. And I'll bring this piece up more often to show like all the different types of light reflections. And you can kind of see my point from earlier. If you see one part of this guy's helmet is nice and reflective, same as this curve. And I kind of went ahead and did both ways for this one because there's so much light bouncing around anyway. We've got this and we've got that, which usually I would suggest not to do that. It can get really muddy really quick. But the basic way is if the helmet's curved like this, essentially kind of like that, it's muddy, but we'll go with it. That means that a slash like this is going to be, where the reflection is. Also, it works the same way with the rest of these, pieces of armor. We've got the arm here that curves like this, so that means that the reflections are going to be following the direction of the metal. Now, the reflections are either going to be white, depending on the light source, or they're going to be red, or whatever color the light source is. Below this guy is a bunch of lava and fire, so it's fair to say that the reflections are going to be rather red, quite warm. So onto the shoulder bit. I'm going to make this a mask so that everything we do is going to stay isolated to that piece that we did, the shape essentially below. So just like the Coke can, we're just going to make that brush way softer. I'm just using a black brush real quick, a nice soft black brush, and we're just going to grab kind of the edges, just like that. You can almost sort of see how the metal's, taking shape and how it's bending, right? Just with that simple shading on the sides. Continue on. Now let's grab that actual blue right there, make it a little darker, and start brushing this in a little bit. So. Just like the light part of, let's say, the Coke can, just like it has a beam of light, it also has reflections of the darker things in its environment. And some could argue this is actually the true color of the metal. But they're not everywhere. Alright, let's add the lighter reflection. And this is pretty much how I start all my metal pieces. What's funny is, if you ask every artist, just about, they'll say they have like one or two favorite things they love to work on because it's like maybe therapeutic or whatever their reason is. Mine, like for example, Dave Greco says he likes to work on hair because he just loves how he loves rendering the hair. It's all flowy, he likes making different shapes and stuff. Mine, it's metal, so you came to the right place. So now also, if we look at our Coke can here, I'm going to come back to this Coke can a lot, most likely. This lip here, this rim, because it's the edge of the metal, the very edge of almost every piece of metal. It's extremely reflective because its corner is so precise. It almost doesn't matter wherever you look. If you're coming this way, that way, that way, that way, or this way, wherever your eyes are, this corner has a side facing you. So because of that, the edges of metal things are often very reflective. So that's something to keep in mind, and we can use that to really help sell the idea that we're painting metal. So on the reflective parts, you add a little extra edge. Same with over here. Now generally, because this entire corner here is pretty much just a bend in the metal, a very sharp bend, almost the whole thing gets a nice reflective bit. Now, depending on how used the metal piece you're making is, most metal pieces, in fact, are often pretty worn down because it's not perfect. Almost no metal is impervious to anything. So keeping that in mind, there's going to be scratches and stuff on the surface, and we'll get more to other types of scratches in a second, but when you're doing this edge work here, something I love to do is while I'm making these edges, I'll add little bumps and nicks. Light's over here, so that means that the reflection on the edge of the piece of metal is going to be most prominent right here. So I'm doing these bumps. The ones farther away from our light line here are going to be a little dimmer than the ones that are closer to